Good evening and welcome. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Ruth Ellor, and I'm delighted to welcome you here on behalf of the Alumni Office at the University of Manchester. Particularly warm welcome to those who are joining us via our live stream as well, and of course to our audience in the room. So 2016 has been quite an incredible year. So we're really delighted to have one of our great political scientists here to comment on that. So Professor Angelia Wilson, expert in US politics, is going to be unpicking a little bit of what's happened. Her title, Populism, Gender and the Joys of Hindsight. Angie is a regular commentator for the media, and you'll no doubt have seen her face on TV before and after the 8th of November. We're especially delighted that Dr. Ray Raymond, as well, is able to join us via Skype. So he's at the State University of New York, and he'll offer us insights from the US direct. Ray is a British diplomat who's had an absolutely amazing career. We're hoping to get him on screen in a moment. He's had an absolutely fantastic career, formerly advisor to Tony Blair and many other senior figures. This is Ray. Let's try that. Hello, Ray. Hello.
They did tell me it was going to go off.
Yeah.
It's all right.
You should be back.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I'm really delighted to welcome Ray. We're having a couple of checks with the sound at the moment, but he'll be back shortly for us. So I had the great pleasure of hearing Ray and Angie speak at an event in October, so I think we've got a real treat in store for us tonight. I'm also delighted that David Buckley, member of our Global Leadership Board, will close the evening for us and say a few words. Special thank you to David for introducing us to Ray as well. You will no doubt have many questions for both Angie and Ray, and we've got ample time for Q&A at the end, as well as more informally over drinks with Angie downstairs at the close of the lecture. So before I hand over to Angie, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. If I can ask you to please turn your mobile phones off. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if we do hear one, we need to exit by the way you came in. And I will now pass over to Angie for a wonderful lecture. Thank you, Angie.
I hope so. Hello, thank you all for coming out and being here with us this evening. The Alumni Office has a lot of faith in me, is all I'm going to say. They think that I'm going to give you some sort of great insights to American politics. And I think the one thing that we can all be really clear about is since November the 8th, we're not quite sure what the insights to American politics are going to be. So what I'm going to do, they asked me for a title in September. So I'm glad I said the joys of hindsight, because gosh, do we have a lot to look back and think, what was that about? So that's what I'm going to try to do a little bit tonight. I have had other things on my mind today. The last few months, I've had some car trouble, and I took it in to the mechanic. And I'm one of those people that if I don't need it, then don't buy it for me. I'm really difficult to buy at Christmas because if I don't need it, there's no reason to buy it. So I've been driving a clunker for years because it keeps going. I don't go anywhere in it. It just goes back and forth to work, and I'll just keep going, and it's fine. The kids are embarrassed because it has a cassette player, but I'm going to continue with my clunker. I took it in the mechanic, and the mechanic said, after he looked at it, went back the next day, he said, never good when a mechanic does that. So I said, okay, what's the problem? He said, well, the engine. And I said, okay, what's wrong with the engine? And he said, well, the engine, it doesn't gin. And I said, right, okay. And he said, but that's not all. And he said, the carburetor. And I said, oh, God, okay. What's wrong with the carburetor? And he said, well, it doesn't carb. And I'm seeing the pound signs go as we continue this conversation. I said, right, okay, is that it? And he said, well, not quite. And I said, okay, what else? And he said, well, the pistons. And I said, right, what's wrong with those? And he said, well, they don't work. I've been thinking a lot about that, thinking about American politics. It's a bit like, at the moment, it feels a little bit like my old clunker. And during Q&A, we can talk about what happened after I left the mechanics, but I won't spoil that right now. But there's a lot of symbolism happening there. American politics is not as straightforward as perhaps we thought it was on November the 7th. Maybe we all thought, oh, Obama, everything's progressing, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. I've been researching the American right, and particularly the American Christian right, for the last 15-ish, 20-ish years, and I have to say, I felt a little bit like Henny Penny. The sky wasn't falling, everything was fine, and everybody kept saying, oh, calm down. The Christian right, the Tea Party, they're going nowhere. That's over. Obama's in with, everything's progressive, everything's going to be fine. Well, the sky is, I am Henny Penny, and the sky certainly feels like it's actually falling. So let's see, just for a little bit, about why that might be. And I know Ray's going to come in and give us some insights about that from Live in America kind of way as well. So I want, first of all, for you to get rid of the idea of cause and effect. Trump is not the effect of a particular cause. There are lots of things going on in American politics for the last, let's even say 10 years. And it's all of those things coming together at any one time, at this particular time, that's led to the outcome that we now have. So I want to run through some of those things, but I don't want you to think about them in terms of cause and effect. It's not a linear relationship. It's more fluid. I got very tech-friendly with my PowerPoint there and went for the whole circles thing, but please do think of it in that kind of fluid kind of way. So I want to go through some of these, and they're not all, but some of these kind of things that have been going on. First, let's look at that word that's out there in the media now. Suddenly, Wolf Blitzer has learned the word populism. So, let's have a little think about what that word might mean. Well, it might just mean a popular movement, uprising of the people. And certainly American politics has seen popular movements that you could call populism in the 1930s and before November the 8th. So it could be a sign of a healthy democracy. There are more people in the public square acting and being political. That's one possibility. Let's put a pin in that one. Certainly this particular populism has something to do with our tradition in America of anti-federalism, how we do not like the federal government. I know my accent, most of you can pick up that I'm not British, but I'm actually from Texas. So when I say I know about American anti-federalism and the South and the right, these are my people. Trust me. So there is a sentiment there of anti-federalism that it picks up on. There's also something going on, and again, let's put a pin in this and come back to it in Q&A. Something that I think that's missing in American politics that gave rise to populism at this point, and that's an absence of what I will call our listening conduits, the ways in which the people speak to those in power. Now, populism, as those on the right tell us, those professors of the right tell us, those students of the right tell us, is that bit that happens in between, where they look up at the elites and they go, you are parasites, you are living off our wages. And they look down and they see a subversive class, whatever that may be, and whoever they are. But those in the middle look down and say, you are lazy, you are parasites, you are living off our welfare, perhaps you are sinful. So it's those in the middle that are caught between what they see as a kind of elite parasite and a parasite from below. And populism, certainly populism on the right, tends to be those caught in the middle somewhere. And we see bits of that in the 2016 elections. Now you might say, well, yes, but Bernie was populist, and yes, he was. And Bernie was able to tap into a populism that was very much about a young person's populism, a populism from the left. The Democrats knew young people don't vote, right? And I guarantee you, as much as maybe you, I, or somebody else would like to believe, if they had chose Bernie, he would be in office now. The reality is Americans are not going to ever vote for anyone who says he's a socialist, because socialist, communist, Marxist, evil, Satan, those all mean the same thing in American politics, and you just don't go there. So on the right, we get this heady mixture now, with the KKK, with the Tea Party, with the Christian right, with those that are angry at the system. So let's look at some of those groups, and let's look at how these work out in terms of other things that might be going on besides populism. Ooh, did we do this? There we go. So let's talk for a minute. I've lost Ruth. I'm worrying about time here. Let's talk for a minute about gender. Now, I have to say, when I was watching the elections, I thought, really people are outraged by Trump? Clearly, no one has ever been a cheerleader in Texas, in the sticks. Because there is truth to, that's just how men there are, and they can get away with it. There is a truth to that. It shouldn't be, and it's not right, and it should be outrageous, and I'm glad that it was outrageous, but certainly people should not be surprised by that. Have a little think for a moment about the life that Hillary has led. She certainly she was not born inside the Beltway, inside D.C. Her and Bill came from Arkansas, the capital of nowhere. I know, because I grew up there. So they came from Arkansas, and they came in, and they were seen as the outsiders. They were seen as the Hicks. And so for a very, very long time, the right has been thinking, oh, Hillary's going to be in charge. She's going to be wanting to run for president. How can we get enough goss and stuff on her and keep at her and ruin her career? Hillary was a lawyer in the Nixon case, so they've had a long time to plan on this. How many of you have ever seen the movie, Hillary the movie? Okay, I know I'll hurry through some of this, but Hillary the movie was going to be on general release during her first primary with Obama, and they got it blocked through the courts because saying this is corporations getting involved in politics, and this is outrageous, and we can't put that much money in, and that became the Citizens United case that opened campaign finance up. So now any corporation give as much as they like to whatever candidate. When I say they didn't like Hillary and they haven't liked her for a long time, I really do mean it. There are then, what are the familiar tropes about women that we had in this campaign? They are sex objects, they are children, they are old women who are either your mother or a witch. right? And that's really, I mean, if you take any basic gender studies class, they'll tell you that's the tropes about women that get played over and over and over in the media. And certainly you can look at the Trump campaign and there are women that fall into each one of those categories. We don't trust Hillary because she's sneaky. Because they can't say that she's unsexy anymore. They can't say she can't bake cookies anymore. There's other things that they've already said about her. And so now we can't trust her because she's old and sneaky. She's a grandma and she knows stuff. There's also, I won't cover all of these because of time, but there's also something about gender going on about a hierarchy of morality. So there's a lot of people in this election that voted their morals, that voted what they believe to be right around reproductive technology. And that is a gender issue that became a gender issue that canceled out everything else. So that one gender issue became the gender issue that it then didn't matter what Trump said about other gender issues, or indeed what Hillary might say about childcare or equal employment or anything else. That one gender issue became the one that canceled out all the rest. Race. It wasn't in the title, because of course we're post-racial with Obama being in the White House, right? We don't need to think about race anymore. Race, of course, has always played a part of American politics, from the Southern strategy where Kevin Phillips told Nixon to go south and to use phrases like getting rid of urban welfare programs, that we believed in states' rights, because states' rights is a key language, is a nice little image, a thing that reminds us about those damn Yankees coming down here and taking our slaves. States' rights is one of those words, phrases that actually means something else. When we in the South say we want states' rights, what we mean is we want to be able to do what we want to people we don't like. We want to be able to do what we want to around abortion or those people that might want access to votes, that we don't want them voting. Voter regulation. And of course we have a history of racism, and I put a big S on there. I've been talking to my students in American politics about the different racisms that happen in America. In the 1930s, California knocked on the door, said, we're in a depression. They knocked on the door of the Mexicans that had come to work on the farms and said, here's a ticket. California city legislatures decided, you know what, we don't need you anymore. They went and bought train tickets and said, here's your ticket back to Mexico. Go or go to jail. So it is within the realm of possibility for America to treat not only blacks hideously, but the Mexican population as well, and probably in the future. Of course, we treat the Cubans a little bit differently, but we were quite happy that the Cubans wanted to leave Castro in the middle of the Cold War and come to Florida. So we've been told that the election was a white-lash, a backlash against having a black man in the White House. It was a white-lash. It was about fear. I'm sure you all know now, by 2050, there will be a majority of minorities. It was a fear, but do not assume that that fear is about the underclass or the working class being mad at black people, that it's the working class racism that got Trump in office. Actually, it's not just the working class have already lost their jobs. This is about the middle classes losing their jobs to a black man or an Asian computer programmer, or, oh, wait a minute, those second, third generations that have now gone to law school and are actually going to be going after our middle class jobs. And it's those white middle class that if you say, are you going to vote for Trump? Oh, no. So they're not going to be easily polled. We're not going to be easily to identify them. How are we for time, Ruth? Okay. Let's talk for a minute about religion. And then I've got one more, and then we'll look at the last slide. So Ray, I'm doing my best, love. So religion. This is something that I've been looking at for quite some time. Again, we can come back to it. Particularly, I'm not looking at Christians in America. There is a Christian left, but it's a bit quiet, unfortunately. I'm looking at the Christian right, and I'm not looking at those grassroots. I'm actually looking in my research at the elites of the Christian right. And I've been spending quite a lot of time in participant observation and looking at the emails that they send out to their constituencies. How do they teach their constituents to respond to particular issues? And over the last 40 years, the Christian right have been teaching their constituents to respond in particular kinds of ways around us and other, around who we are, and we are good, and God is a capitalist, and if you work hard and you succeed, it's because you are blessed by God, and if you are not doing well, it's because there is something morally wrong with you. The theology there is not one that I've found a lot of in Britain, so that may come as a bit of a shock to some of you, but it is a very particular kind of theology that is possibly related to the Bible, not mine. It seems to be slightly more related to, at least for those elites, their access to power and how they hang on to power. So there is a history there of framing issues, of teaching their constituents to respond in certain ways, and it is that Trump, as a good capitalist, was able to capitalize on. The Christian right endorsed Trump, and he did a deal with them. He went into their one of their groups that meet is called Values Voters. It's their training event for the kind of middle managers of the Christian right. And Trump went in and he did a deal with them. And he did a deal that said, I am not one of you, but if you elect me, and they used to be in somewhere between 50 and 70% of the Republican Party, if you elect me, I'll let you have the Supreme Court. I'll let you have the party platform. And they went, well, all righty then. The last one to do that, Ronald Reagan. Romney went in and tried to pretend he was one of them, and that's why they didn't trust him, because they knew he wasn't. Trump, very happy to go and do a deal with him, and he's certainly benefiting from that. So Trump capitalized on a constituency that was ready to hear a particular kind of us and other, a particular kind of make America great again, shining city upon a hill. I'm sure that rings bells in this crowd more than it does in my 18-year-olds. Yeah, we all know Reagan. We know exactly what happened. So, and he's going to be doing deals. That's what we saw with him doing deals with the Christian right. That he did rallies. Instead of having these ground games that was traditional politics out in the sticks and working all these different counties and angles, he did these mass rallies. Now, those mass rallies are very American. The one that I didn't talk much about is sports. It's all about winning. Did any of you watch the CNN election coverage? Oh my God, it was like watching a prize fight. And now, in this corner, we have... Really? This is how we do debates now? Political debates? There was no policy discussion. It was a prize fight. And Trump won. Strategy, a process, a constant adaptation to shifting conditions and circumstances in a world where chance, uncertainty, and ambiguity dominate. I put that in there because that's going to continue to be Trump's strategy. Duck and dive, dodge, do what you need to in order to, because what was it all about? Winning. What do we get out of a Trump presidency? What's next? Well, let's for a moment find a little hope. The power of the presidency is limited. Everybody in Britain kept saying to me, why can't Obama get this through Congress? Well, it doesn't work like that. It's like having Corbyn in charge of the Tories. It doesn't work like that. Okay? So, in terms of legislation, his power is actually quite limited. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people in charge of legislation now that are very, very, very to the right, and they're going to be getting rid of as much of Medicare and Medicaid and those austerity plus kind of measures as possible. But nevertheless, Trump is not going to be in there writing legislation. He's already promised that to someone else. Foreign policy, well, I realize where I'm at, and I'm very happy to be here, and I have lived in this country for 30-something years, and I have family here, so I do not want to insult you when I say this, but y'all will know what it's like to live with somebody in the public eye that occasionally says things that maybe they shouldn't say. And they made a really good Netflix film about, oh no. So occasionally, so in terms of foreign policy, and oddly I said this about him 2 weeks before he started tweeting about Taiwan, but they can't get him off his phone. And so he is going to say things that are going to cause a lot of problems in terms of foreign policy. Whether or not we have generals sitting behind the table that are going to be able to pull us back from the brink, I really hope so. Certainly his appointments at the moment don't make me think that that may be the case. Supreme Court, he is going to appoint, he is going to follow through, and he will appoint very conservative justices on the Supreme Court. The interesting question for me is, what happens to the Christian right when they've won? What happens to the Christian right when they have those justices and Roe versus Wade is history and abortion is illegal in America? What happens to the Christian right then? Because that's been the glue holding them together for a very, very long time. I've talked about the domestic legislative agenda and about the economy. Well, the economy, you know, Wall Street's going to be empty because they're all in the cabinet at the moment. Right? The economists, the Wall Street love him. Let's get rid of regulation. Let's drill. Let's go wherever we want to. Let's get rid of regulation. Let's make a deal. We are open for business. Oop. Hello. There we go. So, I would like to end on a positive note. But I don't sing. And that may be the only hope we have. 4 years' time, I think he's going to upset a lot of people in those 4 years. I think in an ideal world, there will be that young populist movement will continue to grow, and there will be a challenge. And those that he promised things to are already beginning to see that he wasn't ever going to follow through. And most of them kind of knew he wasn't going to follow through with that stuff. They just wanted to upset Washington. Well, they've done that. So hopefully maybe we'll return to normal business, shall we say, in 4 years' time. Okay, I shall turn it over to Ray. What needs to happen now with the... There he is. Ray Raymond. Oh, can we hear him?
Angie, can you hear me?
There we are. Yes.
Super.
We can. I shall turn it over to you, my love.
Okay, let me start by saying that I'm very, very deeply honoured to have the opportunity to contribute to this important event this evening. Equalled by few and surpassed by none, the University of Manchester is one of the greatest universities in the United Kingdom, the European Union, and the world. And as someone who led the Marshall Scholarships in New York for nearly 15 years, I'm especially pleased that this year there are no less than 4 Marshall Scholars at Manchester, which I think is eloquent testimony to the high regard that America's Western brothers have for this great university. Now, I shall try to be brief, lest I stray past the unhappy watershed once alluded to by Lord Justice Perkin, when he commented that he did not mind if his audience kept looking at their watches, but he did object most strenuously if they started shaking them to see if they were still working. So, let's look at this very briefly. What happened and why it happened? Why did Trump win and why did Hillary lose? Because I do believe that Hillary lost. Okay. Big picture. What did we see? I think the election results and the exit polls show something very, very disturbing. They show an American electorate deeply divided and self-segregated from each other, divided along lines of race, class, education, gender, and religion. The exit polls, I think, also show America's widespread anxiety. Americans really worried about their personal financial well-being and their children's future. Deeply frustrated about their political system, as well as the trustworthiness of their political leaders. Trump's coalition was overwhelmingly, though not exclusively white, but overwhelmingly white, and leaned towards male and older white voters, although again, not exclusively. Clinton's coalition had obviously predominantly women, was wealthier, better educated, and she had a hold on the Obama coalition, but just not enough. Trump, by the way, just to I can make one point clear, Trump did not actually expand the Republican voting base, as he likes to boast. In fact, he didn't. But in fact, Hillary lost a significant chunk of the Obama coalition from 2008 to 2012. If you look at the numbers on this, if you look at 2012 and 2016, Hillary lost between, if you compare the two, Hillary lost 1.8 million African American voters as compared to their support for Obama. She lost 1 million millennials, those aged 18 to 29. She lost 1.8 million amongst those aged 30 to 44. And she lost 2.6 million Roman Catholic voters, by the way, Catholic voters who she quite honestly snubbed. In addition, she lost 4.5 million lower income voters, that's to say voters with income of less than $30,000, and we will return to that. Now, obviously, the most important thing is why. I think, as Angie has very ably demonstrated, you should not be surprised by this Trump phenomenon. And there are reasons here that go, as she rightly says, as Angie rightly says, go back a long way. But clearly, I think the key component was economic. This was clearly a revolt of those left behind by globalization, automation, and the failure of the kind of lightly regulated global capitalism which caused the financial crisis of 2008. But there's more to it than that. There was a collapse of confidence, I think, in traditional political structures, a loss of faith in the capacity of Congress to resolve the nation's problems. And even more worryingly, amongst a significant minority of Trump supporters, again, the polling varied between about 25 or 30%, a loss of faith in democracy itself. I find that as a cure-all. It certainly was, in my judgment. And clearly at the centre of that, although again not exclusively, but at the centre of that was the white working class. There was a legitimate case against the economic and political elites that have governed the United States for the past 25 or 30 years. And Trump skillfully and cynically exploited that anger and that alienation. Just look at some of the economic data very, very briefly. Economic and social mobility has stalled for a country whose self-definition is built around the American dream. This new economic reality is a profound shock, both among young millennials and indeed amongst their parents. In 39 states, 39 out of 50 states, in-household earnings are at a level below that of 2007. In rural areas of America, and rural America came out for Trump, you've had declining rural incomes for years. And indeed, most worrying of all perhaps, 1 in 6 men aged 25 to 54 is either out of work or has dropped out of the workforce entirely, living without purpose or hope. To get a deeper understanding, I think, of why Trump won, let's briefly just take a quick look at how he cracked the Clinton blue firewall states in the both Midwestern Rust Belt states of Wisconsin and Michigan and in Pennsylvania. If you look at these counties, which really flipped significantly to Trump, what do you see? I certainly see, I may be wrong, always possible, but I see 4 things. First, a decline in manufacturing. Second, a shrinking population and an aging population. Thirdly, a fraying social fabric, including an alarming increase in the level of opioid abuse, which in turn is reflected in an alarming increase in the death of men aged roughly from around 30 to 55. And you also see in these cases a huge increase in the Hispanic population. And again, here I want to underscore and agree very much with what Angie has said. There was a lot of racial prejudice involved as well. In Pennsylvania, a particularly interesting county there, Luzerne County, to those of you that may know the northeast of the United States, is a little bit of Pennsylvania that is right at the junction of Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey, just that sort of little corner of Pennsylvania. It's the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton metropolitan area. This northeastern Pennsylvania county, Luzerne County, was the swing spot of the state, and they really delivered Pennsylvania for Trump. Luzerne County was basically Pennsylvania's most dramatic swing to Trump. On its own, Luzerne County accounted for roughly 40% of all the Republican votes, basically all the 65,000 votes in the winning margin that Trump had. So 40% of that winning margin for Trump came from this county. In 2012, Barack Obama had carried Luzerne County by 5 points. In 2016, Donald Trump carried it by 20 points. And again, the same characteristics: declining manufacturing, shrinking population, fraying social fabric, increasing opioid use. But you also saw in Luzerne County a dramatic increase in the Latino population, a 1,000% increase between 2000 and 2016. So what I think is striking here is that voters in Luzerne County and nearby counties voted for Donald Trump for the same reason they voted for Barack Obama. And in fact, his margin of victory came from many who had voted for Obama in 2008. Now you're saying, gosh, people who voted for Obama in 2008 voted for Trump in 2016? Yes, some of them did. Because he was the candidate best equipped to shake up Washington. In other words, a large number of voters in Luzerne and nearby counties who voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012 voted for Trump in 2016. They wanted to shake the living daylights out of the system. They have no confidence in Congress. They are deeply mistrustful of political elites, who they feel, I think justifiably, have betrayed them. And indeed, since the 1990s, these elites have been telling them, have been selling them on the merits of technology, advanced technology, and global trade, that this would benefit them. Well, candidly, it hasn't. Indeed, it's reinforced their conviction that the community is in decline. Against that kind of background, I think it's significant to start looking now, and it helps, I think, to explain Hillary Clinton's problems. To begin with, in a year where a majority of voters were crying out for an anti-establishment message and an anti-establishment candidate, Hillary was, of course, the quintessential political establishment candidate at a time when the overwhelming majority of the American public do not trust government to do the right thing. Worse, and I'm afraid that this is true, is that Hillary does not always tell the truth until she is forced to do so, be it concerning the truth about her personal email server and the mishandling, indeed, to quote FBI Director James Comey, the quote, extremely careless, close quote, handling of classified information. This or her health caused very serious problems. The biggest single problem, I think, in terms of Hillary Clinton's relationship with the voters was a lack of trust. And I'm afraid to some degree, she brought it upon herself. Because to many voters, she and Bill appear, rightly or wrongly, to have a sense of entitlement and to play by their own rules. But Hillary Clinton had other problems that I think help explain her failure. First of all, Hillary Clinton never offered a real rationale for her candidacy other than overall competence. And competent she certainly is. Highly capable, experienced, and competent. But this begs the question. I mean, what price experience at a time when the American electorate wants a radical anti-establishment candidate and a radical anti-establishment message? Moreover, Clinton had a library full of policies, most of them candidly very, very sensible policies. But yet, she could never, ever define a clear message, especially not a clear message aimed at white working class voters, who, by the way, she carried in large numbers in the Democratic primaries in 2008, and whom her husband had carried back in the 1990s. Third, Hillary was obviously very competent, very bright, but uninspiring candidate. She needed some magic. She needed some boldness, some imagination, some inspiration, and candidly, it just wasn't there. There was also an appearance of evasiveness and secretiveness. That, I'm afraid, is certainly true, and indeed roughly half the American people at various times of the polls found her to be, again, untrustworthy. Finally, she can indeed sometimes be politically tone-deaf and condescending, and come across like the worst kind of elitist. Her comment about a basket of deplorables, quote-unquote, essentially accusing half of Donald Trump's supporters of being essentially xenophobic bigots, was factually defensible, but politically unwise. But what's even worse, I think, was her dismissive remark at the end of this comment that Trump supporters were irremediable in their bigotry. This was viewed by many voters as distinctively un-American. I think another problem she had during the course of her campaign was her inability to explain and to justify why she had given speeches for Goldman Sachs, for which she received basically almost $250,000 per speech, and to other major investment banks. She was never able to explain it, she was never able to justify it. And I think this really prevented her from being able to tap into the anti-establishment and the anti-Wall Street rage that was out there. And indeed, worse than that, it left her looking like the quintessential self-serving insider cashing in. Moreover, I think it should be said in terms of campaign tactics, she consistently refused to make a serious, sustained effort to appeal to the white working class that her husband had carried, and indeed she had carried back in 2008. She believed that the path to victory was through the Obama coalition. Well, they just did not turn out for her in the numbers that she needed. If you look at any key category of the Obama coalition, she lost basically each of those categories. They dropped by about 6 percentage points. Now, to be frank, as regards working class voters, white voters, she would never have won them over. No. But she might have, and they have cut into Trump's lead, maybe just enough to deny him victory in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Keep in mind that the margin of Trump's victory in those states was really infinitesimal. Certainly in Michigan, it was less than 0.02%, 0.02% of the actual vote. Instead, she concentrated on trying to mobilize the Obama coalition, and they just did not turn out for her in the numbers that they turned out for Barack Obama in 2012 and 2008. I would say finally two brief points, and this is a campaign organizational point. The Clintons were running a late 20th century campaign in a 21st century election. They were looking for late 20th century solutions to every campaign problem. For example, their solution to any problem was more money from more wealthy donors, more consultants, more polling, based on what her Brooklyn, New York City-based team thought, rather than on what angry, alienated voters actually wanted. In other words, her team was out of touch, badly out of touch. And then lastly, we turn to what one might call the FBI effect, James Comey. I do agree with the Clinton campaign when they suggest that the FBI director's intervention announcing the discovery of quote-unquote new and potentially relevant emails. In fact, as you may know, they turned out to be neither new nor relevant, really. They were just copies of emails they'd already gone through. But to make this announcement just about roughly 10 days before polling day was, and I think I agree with the Clinton campaign, fatal. It really was fatal. Because it basically shifted the focus back to Hillary Clinton's biggest weakness, her private email server, her lack of clarity about it, her lack of truthfulness about it all. It really reminded them all. And I think it cost her dearly amongst college-educated, suburban, independent voters, and indeed moderate Republican voters, who were, in fact, by that time, reluctantly rallying to her cause. And I think the Comey effect was very, very serious indeed. So I don't want to emulate the long-winded British politician who Winston Churchill once commented, and I quote, that is as exhausted time and approach upon eternity. So I shall pause and look forward to your questions, comments, and insults.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ray. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to take some questions now, and there's people with purple. Our purple people around with their mics, and we'll take some questions. How long? 15 minutes? 30 minutes? 5 minutes? 20 minutes. Okay, so if you have a question, raise your hand and go for it, and then somebody will come up to you. Ray we'll take one at a time for a minute, and then as time runs out, we'll try to take them in bunches. Is that okay with you?
I'll leave it in your
Okay, marvelous. Go for it.
Good evening on both sides of the Atlantic. Professor Wilson referred to the complete lack of policy discussion during the course of the election, and I'd like you to talk about that. Was that the fault of the media? Was that what the public actually wanted? Is that what they demanded? Because it would have been handy to have had some policy discussion on this central issue of the alienated white working class and what Donald Trump is going to reopen the coal mines and all that sort of thing, when the major issue for the dispossessed in the United States and in Europe and everywhere else is that we need an increasingly educated class of people there, and we'll always need people to do the more menial jobs, of course, you know, and that sort of thing. But what is actually going to happen? That would have been really useful to have actually, for Hillary to have tested Trump on what he actually meant by making America great again, by reopening old-fashioned industries. And one final point is, when he fails to do that, which he's almost bound to do, where are the people going to go then? Are they going to go back to the center, or are they going to go for the Ku Klux Klan?
Okay. I'll have a go at that, and then I'll pass it up to you, Ray. I think the central issue is, I was slightly flippant. They did discuss a few policies. You know, building a wall is a policy. So there were some policies discussed in the debates. But I think, you know, my gut reaction is, had Hillary brought in a tray of her policies and said, look, this is what I have in store, this is how it will help you, they wouldn't have trusted her anyway. And even if Trump had come along and said, these are all of the details, they wouldn't have trusted him. So the less he said, actually the better. The level of trustworthiness, or trust that the workers in that specific kind of class have toward the government is completely lacking. So they're not going to trust. I mean, they voted for the Tea Party to go in and shake things up, and the Tea Party, they look and go, you didn't shake things up enough. So it's the lack of trust. So I'm not entirely sure that had we had a policy discussion, that the white working classes would have been swayed by that. They may have, but I don't think it was about their education levels. You are at your peril to think that white working class are uneducated about politics. But it would have been that they just simply don't trust politicians anymore. Ray?
I agree with that, Angie. Absolutely, 100%. Can I just add that I think that the media was certainly responsible. I think you're absolutely right in characterizing much of the American electronic media, certainly not the print press, but the electronic media, as seeing the election as a kind of prize fight. That's certainly how they saw it, how they covered it. But I think you're absolutely right in saying that I don't believe and I agree with you, I do not believe a policy discussion would have been listened to. The level of anger, the level of despair, I think was well captured by a worker from a mill town in Pennsylvania who basically said, you know, and he told this to the Boston Globe, and he said, I don't give a damn, he said, what Trump says. It's more how he says what he says. I am interested in him because he's angry, he's going to shake Washington up, and I don't really care what precisely he does, but he's going to shake Washington up, and that I am happy with, and he gives me some hope. But I think you're absolutely right that basically, for policy wonks like you and I, we were deeply, and indeed for the learned question that has been asked, it was deeply disappointing to all of us. But this was dealing with a tsunami of despair and anger, and born also of a very deep distrust of political elites. I don't think they would have listened to either one of them.
I agree. Okay. Do you want to take it over there? And then...
Hello, Angela. Hello, Professor. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I've got two questions in one. How we, over in us Limeys, we perceive American politics in all kinds of different ways. But how big is Donald Trump in the sense of, can he make Congress do his bidding like Obama couldn't?
No, he can't make Congress do his bidding. However, he does have a Republican Congress, and I suspect it might work the other way around, because he's done quite a deal with them.
Yeah.
And having said that, and this is again a small little bit of hope, Congress has to go through this again in 18 months. You know, there's a lot of the House of Representatives that have to do this again in 18 months, this election thing. So how much they're going to stick their neck out and go further and further and further to the right is a bit, maybe not so much. So I think we'll see Trump get us into trouble with his mouth in terms of foreign policy. I think he'll get us into trouble, he will get us into trouble maybe through executive orders, and he is certainly going to put people forth on the Supreme Court that maybe not what Clinton would have put, she said.
Well,
but in terms of legislation, I think it may be the other way around, that Trump will be doing Congress's bidding.
Yeah, because my kind of perception was, I mean, according to the Spiegel, they kind of like Trumpism. A lot of people in Germany kind of like his style, you know, get the boogeyman out of bed, get it out there in the media. But my concern is that he's done a deal with the Christian right, and I've researched them carefully. They have an alternative worldview. So
They do?
Well, yeah, they have a different
they
approach to politics and a deep philosophy about how it should be approached, particularly in the Middle East. So I'll leave it there, but thanks very much.
Okay, great. Can you just there, and then would you mind coming this way? If we could get the things there before, then we won't have to waste time with it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Angie, can you hear me?
Yeah, love, go for it.
Sorry, I'd just like to add one thing,
Please
if I may.
do.
I totally agree with you on that, but I would just add to the point. It's important to always keep in mind that the two houses of Congress have different institutional interests and different institutional prerogatives. As you rightly point out, the House is always more interested in re-election, and ideologically, even the last time there was a Republican president and a Republican Congress, it was not all smooth sailing, far from it. And in fact, they will have different priorities, different approaches, and indeed, the only person in the Republican team who actually has some coherent policies, whether you agree with them or not, is Paul Ryan, the House of Speakers. So I think it could well be going a reverse way.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, here and then here.
Okay. Can you hear me? You can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Two great presentations. Thank you very much indeed. My question, have we learnt anything so far which is relevant to the next general election in the UK?
Okay. Thank you for asking a UK-related story. A question. I shall tell you my UK-related story, and it goes like this. My son had some of his mates and their parents around at some point late summer, and one of the parents is a guy, works in a local factory, he's an electrician. And he said, well, I voted for Brexit. And he said, I'll tell you why. And so he was talking about why he voted for Brexit, and we don't want all those Turkish people to come over, and we don't want, and the EU, they will continue to have contracts with us, so that's why, even if we leave, so I voted. And he said, I'll tell you what happened. We were sat around the break room at work, and we were all going, oh, what's this Brexit thing? What's it about? What's it about? And one guy came in, he said, I'll tell you what it's about. This is what it's about. All these Turkish people coming over, and they're going to continue to have trade deals with us even if we leave, so vote to leave because that's a good thing. And I said, oh, well, that's really interesting. Didn't say anything to him, but my immediate little red flag went up and said, isn't that interesting? That used to be the job of the shop foreman. And you break the unions, and then you don't have a shop foreman that becomes the conduit, I said about the listening conduit, between the worker and the political elite, whoever that is, if that's Republican or Democrat in this case, right? So whoever that is. So it's interesting the question is, who is in this country, as in the US, who is going to be the person that listens and becomes that kind of place in the middle, okay? I'm going to move on to the next question just because of time, if that's all right, Ray?
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you both.
And then you take this one. Are you all right?
Can you hear me?
Yeah?
Yeah. Professor Wilson, you mentioned in your talk you talked about the fragmentation of the right. I just wondered if you had any more thoughts on that, and particularly whether you thought, given what's happened these past 12 months, whether there was now space and an opportunity for the left, particularly the Christian left, to organise in a similar way to how we've seen the Christian right organise over recent history.
Okay, I'm going to have one quick answer to that, Ray, but you get your what's next answer ready, because I don't know that one. So in terms of that phrase, the fragmented right, the right in America let's start with the Christian right, are incredibly good at working across theological lines, and that would have normally divided them. So post Roe v. Wade, Francis Schaeffer called it co-belligerency. He said the Catholics and the evangelicals need to work together on this one issue in what is called co-belligerency by themselves. And the right is incredibly good at saying, okay, this is our issue, and we are going to all work together co-belligerently toward that. The left goes, oh, I don't want to work with you. I think this is more important. No, my thing's more important. Oh, no, my thing's more important. No, my thing's more important. And we're not good at going, you know what, even if I don't like your politics about everything else, we're going to get together on this point. And I haven't seen the left in America certainly pull themselves together in that way. And so far, the Christian left is not strong enough to do that. Ray, tell us what's next, love. Both of these questions were about what's next in American politics. Is the left going to come back?
I think it just might. Young people, certainly, the sort of students that I teach at the State University are certainly ideologically far to the left. But what I think is interesting, if you go back to the last time, historically, that the Christian left was significant in American politics, and it goes back to the 1960s. You saw the Christian left very active in support of the civil rights movement. You saw also the Jewish leadership joining in. There was a tremendously positive alliance there. What they're going to need, as indeed they had back in the 60s, is a driving force. What they need is issues, concerns that will galvanize them. I do not claim to have a crystal ball, but certainly I feel confident that Mr. Trump will certainly give them plenty to be galvanized about, plenty to drive them with. And I think I'm cautiously optimistic. A lot will depend, as you rightly say, on organization, because the left all too often has been exactly the way that you characterize it. Myopic. I mean, just basically one group not able to see beyond the end of their nose. They're going to have to get out of that. And I think the shock of a Trump victory and the shock of what some of those Trump policies are going to be could, I will not say will, but could just be enough to supply the kind of energy and driving force and, if you will, defining issues that the Christian left had in the United States in the 1960s.
Fingers crossed. If they listen and if they can find that driving force, there's nothing quite like a common enemy, and certainly Trump provides them with that.
Exactly.
So there's a young man here. Fantastic. If you were an alumni, we are all so impressed. Thank you for coming. Go for it.
How much of a part do you believe the internet had in Trump's election? Because certainly speaking from what I saw, people were a lot more public in display of support for Trump and generally, outright hatred for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. The internet gives us all some sort of anonymity. We can, all those bits of us that we really don't want to be on show, we can go bleh, down the internet, So unfortunately it does that. It gives people a public voice that might not want their private thoughts, or previously wanted their private thoughts out, but they can do that now anonymously. You can build a lot of hatred in the comment section. Any of you that ever read comment sections from any news article, you know that.
They've been a bloodbath.
Indeed.
November.
Yeah, onwards. They've been hideous. The other thing that the internet does, though, unfortunately, is puts us all in our own echo chambers. You were all young enough to be using Facebook. Apparently, Facebook is very last season, my students tell me now. But if you're over 30, we're all still using Facebook. And we all live in our own little echo chambers there. And we read the things that we want to read. And Facebook feeds us the things that we want to see. And so does the right in that sense. They kind of get these kind of echo chambers of these alt-right groups that build over time. And certainly, the internet has been both good in that it connects you with other people, and bad in that it does leave us sometimes in our silo. Do you want to say something about the internet, Ray?
I do. I very much agree with you. It leaves people in their silos. I am also desperately worried about the impact of fake news and the tendency of these, frankly, the irresponsibility of groups like Facebook and Google, who had to be brought almost screaming to reluctantly accept and to acknowledge that in fact they had put out there into the public domain absolutely outrageous and irresponsible stories. I'm not a fan of technology, I will say, and I think I would lean to the view that technology has on the whole been extremely unhelpful to our democratic discourse. But I'm very, very concerned about fake news. I sincerely hope that groups like Google and Facebook will face up to the reality that they have grave responsibilities to ensure that whatever they publish is well written, well sourced, and actually accurate, as opposed to a great deal of nonsense, quite apart from being hateful as well. So I think not optimistic, but I do think that these technology companies bear a huge responsibility, and so far they are failing.
I don't know if you know, Ray, but in the Oxford English Dictionary, the new word of 2016 is post-truth. We live in a post-truth society. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions, and then we'll try to wrap it up. So you have a question here?
I have two questions. One...
No, you can just get one.
Okay. They're related. Who should and could have run against Trump instead of Hillary? So rumours about Joe Biden. And secondly, is there anyone in the Democratic Party to look out for in the next 4 years?
Ray?
Because it seems to be in disarray.
Ray?
I heard, Andrew, could you repeat the first part of the question?
Was there a serious possibility that could have been a Democratic candidate that would have done better than Hillary? And how deep is the Democratic bench? Do we have people on the bench that can step up in 4 years' time?
Okay, my view on that, I may be wrong, but I think a better candidate for the Democrats would have been Joe Biden. Now, he would have carried the burden of being a vice president, but Joe Biden comes from working class roots in Scranton, that area that I was speaking about earlier. He can speak to white working class voters. He could have, I think, done probably marginally better than Hillary Clinton amongst the rest of the Obama coalition, and I think overall would have been a considerably stronger candidate. Whether he would have defeated Trump, I don't know, but certainly he would have been a stronger candidate than Hillary. But by the way, it's important to keep one little fact in mind. For all the criticism of Hillary Clinton's campaign and her candidacy and so on, it's important to note she did win the popular vote by, at the last count, roughly, I think about 2.5 million votes, which is significant. So for all her weaknesses, she still managed to eke out that victory. On the second part of the question, I would simply say that I think the Democratic talent bench is extremely thin. One of the reasons being that the talent normally comes from the governor's races. The Republicans have very skillfully captured the vast majority, in fact, of state houses in the United States. But there is one person I would draw to your attention who interests me, and that is Julian Castro. No relation to Fidel, I'm glad to say. Julian Castro was a very brilliant young Latino mayor of Houston, Texas, and now HUD secretary under President Obama. Very, very impressive young man. He's only in his late 30s. Someone to watch out for.
Thank you very much. And I would add probably Elizabeth Warren's probably not done. I don't know that she'll run, but she's probably not finished. Okay, you have our last question. So there you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yes. One of the things that's troubled me about Brexit and the Trump campaign is that the tendency of people to assert something as truth, and if they assert it loudly enough, that seems to be enough. And my question is about the whole education system. In the UK, we seem to be teaching to tests, to exams, from the earliest possible age right through to undergraduates. We're not teaching kids to think. We're not teaching even undergraduates to think for themselves and to be able to tell the difference between, these truths and non-truths. And is it the same in America?
I'll just say that, and I'll hand it over to you in a second, Ray. I think I would agree with you 100%. And part of what I have been looking at in my research is how the Christian right have been strategic at education. They learned very early on that education is the way you build a constituency. So Where is the most powerful political position that you can have? The state school boards, right? You take over in America, you take over the state school board, then you get to choose what the curriculum is. And in Texas, the Christian right took over the state school board, and that's very important because Texas is the largest textbook market in the U.S. And if your state adopts it, then that's the one that the publishing house is going to publish, and then that's the textbooks that then get put out. And so across the U.S. And so the Texas State School Board, the Christian right took over the Texas State School Board. There's a movie called The Revisionist, the documentary that talks about this, and they decided that science books would teach intelligent design alongside evolution. So it's incredibly important. If you want to be political, become a school governor. You know, it is incredibly important that we teach children how to be civically engaged. And I know it's very boring, and I know but citizenship lessons actually could change our engagement of our young people and how they think about politics and get engaged with politics in the future. Texas, I came through the Texas education system. I left, I keep telling people. But I came through the Texas education system. We had one semester of government class, and that was it in a 4-year high school. And it was taught by the football coach. Clearly, it is why I'm here today, is that I was taught by the football coach. Ray, tell us about education in America. Is that one of the ways forward?
I agree with you, Angie, absolutely. Can I speak to the questioner's wider point about teaching to tests? It worries me very, very, very deeply. As someone who teaches at a public university college, I see the consequences of this teach-to-the-test approach here in the United States. It is dreadful. The students have great difficulty with any sort of critical thinking, and it's been very, very harmful. Worse than that, I think, it has taken away their love of learning and their love of thinking. I mean, when I was a child growing up in the UK, I loved learning because there was always the chance to think, there was always a chance to read a different perspective and think about things, and that's what made it fun. And I think it's really killed education for so many youngsters in the United States. It's killed their love, it's killed the joy of learning for them. It's terrible. In addition, Angie, I agree with you totally that many, many states have no civics education whatsoever. Or if they do, it's taught by the baseball coach or something, which is just appalling. And it leaves students without any grasp of politics at all. I mean, I just before I joined you, I finished, I was just teaching my course in American politics, and the students, I mean, wonderful though they are as young people, their lack of basic knowledge that they should have been taught in high school is absolutely mind-boggling. And we need a renewed emphasis on teaching civics in the schools. It's got to be done, because if not, you end up with with a generation that knows nothing about politics, sees no possibility for actually affecting it. I always tell my students, for example, if you want to fix gerrymandering, for example, the deliberate fixing of house boundaries, this is a state-level responsibility. And if you're upset about it, well, go do something about it. Go write to your member of the state assembly. Go and join them. Go lobby them. That's what makes an impact. And it's sort of news to them that you can actually do that. And I find that quite staggering. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that teach to the test is detrimental not just to critical thinking, but to a love of learning and to an appreciation of not just the responsibilities, but the joy and the privilege of being part of a democracy.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to hand over now, and I want to kind of say something about the University of Manchester and and teaching politics at the University of Manchester before we end the session. And that is to say, Manchester, certainly in politics, we're very aware of the political history in Manchester. And we talk with our students about that Manchester is supposed to be. It is their political history in Manchester to cause upset and to get involved in politics. And this is who we are in Manchester, and so you shouldn't just be learning this stuff for the test or writing the essay, that you should be involved in your communities and you should be involved in arguing and thinking all sides of the political spectrum. So, yeah, I do think that we do it here. I don't know, we'll see. Hopefully there'll be more politicians from the University of Manchester soon than from Eton, but... Okay, I shall... Indeed, indeed. I shall hand it over now. Thank you.
Right, well, thank you. Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Ray, and thanks to all of you for coming here tonight, and indeed for the 250 or so people who are either watching or listening to this on live streaming. I think the quality of the presentations, the quality of the discussion has just been incredible, and I've certainly learnt a lot. I'm no expert in American politics at all, but what I would say is that on the eve of the US election, I was actually working in Beijing. And Angie, Ray and I had a little email exchange at the time, and I'm a finance markets guy, and I emailed back saying, well, here's my little bit of added value, that if Clinton gets in, we expect the stock markets to rise around the world, and if Donald Trump gets in, we expect Armageddon in the stock markets. So I went off to bed, got up the following morning, saw that Trump was in, and saw that the S&P futures were down about 5.6% or so, and thought, yeah, I've got this right, because I got these messages back from both Ray and Angie saying, thank you for that very insightful insight to all of this. And lo and behold, the markets in the US and around the world all went up that day, and they've as you know, and certainly in the stock market side, I know the bond markets had a bit of a trashing in recent weeks, but the markets have done well. So I'm not in the forecasting business, I have to say. But I'm the last thing between us and getting a glass of wine downstairs, so I will be very brief. I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on myself and talk a little bit about the work I'm doing with the university. I graduated in 1984 with a degree in electronics and electrical engineering, and spent some time in manufacturing industry and then in one of the large accounting firms before spending 20 years in the investment banking world. The majority of that was with Goldman Sachs, and I haven't received a call from Donald Trump to join the government yet. I'm still waiting for that to come through. But having left that industry, I moved into the private equity space for 3 years before doing what I do today, which is I run a portfolio of non-exec directorships of private and public companies, and I'm involved in various advisory boards, one of which is the Global Leadership Board for Manchester University that Ruth alluded to at the outset of this presentation. The Global Leadership Board is a group of local supporters to the university and alumni, and we meet twice a year to basically give advice and support to the university, to Nancy Rothwell and to the alumni groups as well, to look both at strategic issues for the university but also importantly fundraising. And all of the members of the Global Leadership Board are engaged with the university in a philanthropic way. And so for my own part, my involvement with Manchester kind of rekindled in 2000 when I was with Goldman's out in Asia, and I got involved with something called Manchester Gold, which many of you may be either aware of or involved with, which is a mentoring service for final year undergraduates to help guide them to get good jobs in the industries in which they want to get into. And so that's how I started with the university. But subsequent to that, I've got involved philanthropically, and my wife and I are now supporting our second PhD student. And I met him this afternoon. He's doing some incredible work in physics, which I can't explain. But he's got some really cool kit, actually, that we had a good look at this afternoon. But the point here is that this particular individual is a Somali refugee and doesn't have status in this country. And so our ability to provide for his PhD philanthropically is something that the university just simply couldn't do in its own right. So for all of us and all of you who are giving to the university, I would encourage you to think about how to keep engaged, because it really can make a big difference. And to see this guy who is just so enthused by what he's doing, getting involved in this work, is just truly incredible. So do please keep engaged. Thank you again for coming. Those of you online, thank you for listening and watching. Huge, huge thanks to Dr. Raymond and Dr. Wilson. Please join me again and see you downstairs for a glass of wine. Thank you, everybody.